Hi everyone, RFG here with a review for Disco Samurai, an isometric rhythm action game mostly focused on combat, developed by Pixel Fiber Games and published by We Dig Games, currently available on Steam. The game opens with Fox, who has plans to meet up with her friend Gary, though after another day of no luck on her job search, he suggests a vent in a PvP event in the popular game, Disco Samurai, but she'll end up taking on a more fulfilling task that occurs inside the cyber metaverse of Disco. The game is split into chapters that bookend with the outside of the metaverse, where levels progress by interacting with mandatory prompts inside the diorama-style stage design. These parts of the game give you insight into Fox's daily routines and events related to Disco. Following the outside world prompts eventually leads you into the Disco metaverse. You'll still progress through mandatory prompts within, but it's here where all of the combat takes place. It's most important to know that just about every part of combat is dependent on being on beat, and underneath Fox is a visual indicator of the beat timing. Your base combat abilities, as they'll quickly be taught, are sword attack, charged attack, parry, and dash. You can also freely move around each of the diorama-styled levels, but you'll mostly just need to be moving for better positioning. Your sword attack is your most consistent way of dealing damage, and as long as you're on beat, you can basically attack indefinitely, while missing a beat means you miss your attack. At the top of the screen is a streak counter for keeping up your rhythm. Your charged attack must be held for one beat to be able to perform successfully, but it deals more damage than the regular attack and can hurt an enemy's balance gauge, which I'll get into in a bit. You can see an enemy's health bar below them. Enemies also attack in beats that usually form strings or patterns where each beat of a string displays an icon above them that telegraphs their type of attack one at a time. The most common icon will be their initial red exclamation point warning before their attack string begins, which is then followed by an icon signaling each specific attack afterwards. An enemy's attack will usually have priority over yours, meaning that timing your attack with an enemy has you take damage, or you'll trade in damage with them. But considering your health, located at the bottom of the screen, is more limited than your enemies, risking a trade in damage is ill-advised. There's a number of ways to avoid taking damage from most enemy attacks. You can move around while they're attacking, dash, or parry. Most levels aren't big enough to keep away from enemies for long, so basic movement is often best limited to reposition yourself to a specific enemy. Dashing allows you to instantly avoid enemy attacks, but you can only dash at max 2 beats in a row and will need to wait at least 1 beat before you can dash again. Dashing also has to be done on beat, so missing the beat means you miss the dash. Parrying is similar to your sword attack in that as long as you're on beat, you'll be able to parry consecutively without interruptions depending on the enemy attack strings. Its core usage is to reduce an enemy's balance gauge located below their health, which when depleted, leaves them stunned. Enemies only stay stunned for a short amount of beats, but the first hit you land on an enemy after they're stunned deals critical damage. Besides your basic attack, you'll obtain the pistol early on to shoot enemies. Shooting deals more damage than your sword attack and can hit enemies from a distance. Each shot requires 1 stock of flow to use. You can see the amount of flow you have above your health bar. You'll obtain other flow powers that also require 1 stock per use, with each having their own advantages. Similar to other actions in Disco Samurai, flow powers must be on beat to use. Earning flow should come naturally as you attack, precisely dash, and parry enemies, but managing when to use your flow powers and when to take advantage of stunned enemies for critical hits can determine how you'll clear a level. Each level has a set amount of enemies that need to be defeated before you can find the prompt to move on to the next, and though you begin each level at full health, many stages can have multiple waves of enemies to clear before you can progress. There are no health recovery abilities to gain, so lasting through multiple waves can be difficult, especially since you don't begin a level with available flow, and while earning flow comes with attacks, precise dashes, and parries, it's important to know that parrying itself doesn't negate all enemy attacks. There are multiple types of enemy attacks that will gradually get introduced throughout Disco Samurai. Most attacks will need to be parried, both to whittle down an enemy's balance gauge and to avoid taking damage, but some enemy attacks have special timings or can't be parried at all. The game eases you with new enemy attack types pretty comfortably, but eventually mixes these into more enemy attack strings and patterns that you'll need to correctly time with the correct parry or dash timing as you try to defeat each enemy while staying on beat. And though you don't have a way to heal yourself in the middle of a level, unlockable keychains can help you make your way through Disco Samurai. Unlocked keychains can be equipped to Fox in the menu. Each one of the 3 keychain slots are opened automatically when reaching a certain level, and keychains are unlocked after beating specific level challenges you'll come across. You can view what the unlock level for the slots and keychains are in the menu, and the unlock conditions for a keychain will appear in the top right corner of the level that the challenge is available in. Keychains have different effects that can benefit Fox in multiple ways, but some challenges can be more difficult than others, and that's on top of the game's already increasing difficulty in later levels. That being said, the game generally feels fairly generous in terms of progression. Beating and moving to the next level saves that progress, and dying will let you restart you in your current level and let you change your equipped keychains. If you feel like you got off to a bad start, you can pause the game and restart the level immediately. Some levels, depending on your progress within, will let you restart the entire level or restart the last fight. Level Select is also available pretty much immediately, and that does allow you to revisit earlier levels with new keychains if they're unlocked. Boss encounters are one exception, as these are separated into phases where you won't get the option to restart a phase. The boss's health is located at the top of the screen, and underneath is their balance gauge. Knocking the balance gauge down to 0 puts them into the damage phase that requires you to input a specific attack rhythm to deal damage. Correctly inputting the attack rhythm deals full damage to the boss and moves them into the next phase. If you fail to input all of the attack string correctly, you'll repeat the previous phase with the rest of their health remaining. Boss encounters aren't limited to one attack pattern, and those patterns can change in a subsequent phase. Motorcycle levels are another exception, as these don't have checkpoints to restart from, and taking any hit is instant death. These start off fairly basic with just needing to switch between the left, middle, and right lanes, but in later levels will add obstacles that need to be jumped over and have enemies to eliminate. Selectable difficulties that affect most of the game are there to choose from, though you can only select a difficulty at the beginning of a playthrough, so if you're having trouble on a particular level or finding the game too easy, you'll have to beat the game or start over from the beginning on a new preferred difficulty. There are multiple profile save slots you can use just in case you do want to keep that progress, which you may want to considering there is a level select, and beating the game unlocks a disco difficulty mode that can only be selected on a new playthrough. I did end up trying a bit of all difficulties after I beat the game once, and couldn't notice too much of a difference between them other than the amount of health you have per level. My first playthrough was on the Balanced Master Track difficulty, where I did find the game was usually pretty fair, and this is because of the way most of Disco Samurai's combat is designed. Combat is the main focus of Disco Samurai, and if I had to describe it in one word, it would be balanced. You will go against many enemies in Disco Samurai, oftentimes rooms full of them, and many times waves of them, but it's rare that a level felt unfair. Part of this is because most enemies will attack one at a time, but you can usually also only damage one enemy at a time, creating that initial sense of balance. Keep in mind that doesn't mean one enemy will attack you until they're defeated and then another one will jump in after. Instead, that means if you're nearby several enemies, any of them can decide to attack you after one is done with their string, they are stunned, or after you've been hit. A lot of Disco Samurai's challenge will come from handling multiple enemy strings back to back while trying to stay on beat. That also means you may occasionally have to deal with several different attack patterns that require different defensive responses and then adapting to another in the span of a few beats. There's more to that as well. I think just about every level is unique in some way. Chapter levels share an aesthetic theme and you may have some repeat rooms to visit, but even with the diorama-styled isometric design, the room layouts and sizes can vary quite a bit. This works similarly with the enemies, as some may share their look and attack strings of each other in the same level, but some enemies with the same look in one stage may have a different attack string in another, so remembering attack patterns by enemy design might not provide much benefit in another level. This adds to the challenge later on, as by the end of the game, enemies have a pretty decent number of attack types that you'll need to react to or memorize, and that's another part of the combat that does feel balanced. Having that beat where an enemy's icon is displayed does give you a decent amount of time to adjust to a specific attack and a string reactionarily. I do think that those who do have an easier time learning and memorizing short patterns will probably have an easier time of getting through Disco Samurai's more difficult levels, but there is more to add to the challenge. Some enemies do have less conventional attacks to keep track of, and many stage layouts can have an impact on how you may need to approach some enemies. Other levels may have stage hazards that work against you, but can also be used to your advantage. As I mentioned before though, I do think some levels did feel a bit unfair. These were limited in number, but I'd say it was due to enemy compositions that consist of having enemies that could attack at long range, while a melee enemy could attack simultaneously. But it's in these levels where you might really need to make the best use of your flow powers and adjust your keychains. These aren't really applicable to the motorcycle levels, which actually feel more lenient on timing, but beating them does rely mostly on reacting accordingly or memorizing their layout, though these sequences are only required to try a few times, and failing enough will allow you to skip past them completely, which does kind of baffle me since I'm not sure why they can be skipped instead of just having different game over conditions based on difficulty. Boss encounters have their own issue, although not from the fights themselves. They are lacking in number as there are less boss encounters than motorcycle levels, but the fact that they're attached to one character makes this more noticeable. The encounters themselves are fine as each one is varied and they provide a good, fair challenge, so it is kind of a shame that there isn't more of them, even if it makes sense story-wise. As for the story, most of it can't be missed since Disco Samurai is designed to be linear and won't let you progress without interacting with the mandatory prompts, though there are some optional interactions that give more of an insight into Fox's thoughts or a little extra context to what's going on in the main story. It does start under a fairly mundane premise, but it eventually grows into a more intricate plot, as well as providing growth for its characters, with the story-focused outside world bookends of a chapter providing some extended break time from the almost non-stop action that takes place in Disco. That action is also accompanied by a good amount of quality music. Each chapter has its own fast-paced track, and even though you may think they can get repetitive, they really don't. Boss encounters have their own themes that will shift depending on the phase, and no matter the level, the tracks usually did a good job of getting me back in sync with the beat. The outside world tracks tend to be far more calm, but that tone fits well with them since they don't involve combat and function mostly as bookends to chapters. Disco Samurai's rhythm combat makes for a pretty fun and challenging experience. It rarely feels unfair, but never feels impossible. I do think there might be a decent sized gap between those who find it more difficult than others, but I think there's something that rhythm genre and action game genre fans can enjoy. If the pixel art and its diorama style level design don't immediately grab your attention, I think the gameplay and music just might. So check out the Steam store page if you're interested. And that's it for me. Let me know what you think below. Thanks. Bye.